Welcome to the Create the Life You Want podcast, where we break down the journey of people just like you going from dream to ownership in business acquisitions, franchises, and startups. I'm your host, Jeremy Ames. Today's episode is brought to you ad-free by Guidant Financial. Guidant is America's leading company helping aspiring entrepreneurs use retirement funds to buy or start businesses. If you're committed to buying or starting a business, you can find out more about your funding options by going to www.guidantfinancial.com. That's Guidant financial.com. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Create the Life You Want podcast. Today, I'm joined by John Thomas, and John has an interesting story where in his early years, he was a small business owner. And then he went into the corporate world for many years, gathered skills, and then decided to make a jump back into ownership, but to do it a little bit differently the second time around. So this will be a really interesting story, John, to hear from you, because you've experienced this in a number of different ways, both a small business that was just you, and then working in various aspects of the corporate world at scale, and then trying to get back into small business ownership, but doing it in a way where it's not entirely dependent on you. So thanks for joining us today, John.
Hey, it's great. Thanks for having me, and appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, John, maybe first let's just talk about what is the business that you started recently, and how long ago was that?
The most recent one we started in 2020, right in the throes of COVID-19.
Great timing.
Yeah, wonderful timing. And it is strictly a handyman company, although we've kind of grown it to do a few larger projects in addition to the handyman, but it's mostly a handyman company.
Great. Why don't we start first with, it sounds like in your early years you had a business. Why don't you talk about that? And has it always been a dream of yours to go back and become a business owner again? Or was there something else that was the catalyst for you going back down this path?
So when I graduated high school, my brother was already going to the UT, and we both were from Texas. Anyway, he was already there. He already had an apartment he was renting, so it kind of fit real nice for me to just join him. So I did that, and we were going to school at the same place, and I got a job for Manpower, and they just assign you to projects, work as extra work. And I went to 3 or 4 places, but finally ended up at a hardware store, um, boxing up hardware for commercial and large residential projects. And the hardware was doors and locks and hinges and door closers and kick plates and thresholds and all the towel bars, paper holders, all the stuff, the hardware in the house, right? Or in the apartment, the 500 600 complex apartment units. And I was hired directly away from Manpower into that organization, and after a few years, I became their head locksmith. So I'd be keying the locks for the individual units all alike, and then a master key for the building and a grandmaster for the complex. And I started, with permission from my boss, I started moonlighting to help those guys out whenever they need installation work. And after a while, the sales rep that was selling the stuff went to a different company within the San Antonio area, and she talked the owner into offering me a job to come with her because we worked well together, and she knew me and could trust my work and that sort of thing. So that sprung board into more opportunities for me. They were willing to work with my school schedule. I was going to college at the time, and we at that store we sold a mortise lock, a Baldwin mortise lock. These were $700-800 locks plus the trim, so
Wow.
pretty high dollar items. And our clients would be bringing these locks back to us, not all the time, but on several occasions, just in a box, saying these things are worthless. They're falling off my door. I don't like them. And so I'd go out and reinstall it for them. And I would see the quality of work that was going into installing these locks and it was just atrocious, you know. So I went back to my boss and I told him, you know what? After doing this several times, I said, why don't we just open our own division for door and hardware installation, you know, where we just install it ourselves. And he said, and I'd be happy to head it up and get a few guys and train them, and we could, you know, we could have another department and be installing these things. And he thought about it a while, and he came back to me and he said, you know what? I talked to Ian Fisher was the big boss guy, and he said he didn't want to take the risk because these are, you know, solid oak doors with stained glass in them. And
Yeah.
he said, you mess it up and we'd have to buy another $5,000 door, and I don't want to do that. And I said, okay. And after 3 or 4 weeks, I quit and started my own company doing that. And
Interesting. So your first foray into entrepreneurship came because you pitched an innovation to your bosses and they said no.
they said no. Yeah.
So you just did it anyway.
So I did it anyway, right? And I
Okay.
was
So
running
John, first of all, I have to ask, what makes a lock worth $800?
oh wow, it's and they're over $1,000 right now. You can still buy them. They the trim package comes in several different packages, you know, styles and everything. They're made out of solid brass,
Oh, okay.
and the lock is a mortise. Looks like a narrow box that's about 4 or 5 inches high and about 4 inches deep and about 1 inch thick, and it has a faceplate. If you look at the old timey houses, if you ever get a chance to see the edge of the door, you'll see it because it'll be a plate that's about that long instead of just a regular latch. They last they last indefinitely. You take care of them, they will last you forever, and they're not going to fall apart like your typical you know, Kwikset or Schlage. Schlage's a little better, but say Kwikset or Falcon or somebody like that they just make the residential locks. So these are high dollar locks, and they match up well with the $5,000 or $6,000 entry doors that you install.
Yeah. I love that we're nerding out on door latches, by the way. So, John, you pitch this to your bosses. Your bosses say no. You quit to go start this thing. And then what happens?
Uh, First I had the tool up, right? So I bought some tools. I wiped out my savings. I had a little bit of a savings, but wiped out my savings buying the tools I needed, and all the profits I made from jobs, I would buy more tools and more tools and more tools. It's important to take care of your tools, and it's important to have the right tools for the job, and that way you can do quality work. So I guess the first year was really just tooling up, and I thank heavens I was living with my parents, and so they allowed me to live with them while I was going to school, and I'd go to school on Tuesdays and Thursdays from about 4 to 10 o'clock at night, and you know, I'd do the and then work on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that was my life for almost 5 or 6 years. You know,
Oh, wow.
since I was only going 2 days a week, I didn't finish in 4 years, but I wasn't that concerned about it. So I had a great time. I finished school debt free, paid for all my college with this business. And one of the last jobs I did was for the vice president of Zachary Construction in San Antonio, and I did his entryways and his door locks and the full package to his house. So not only his front door, but also all the doors in his house, and some trim work. And the interesting thing is I did a lady, I did some work for a lady that the wife of the vice president was friends with, and she happened to be at the house when I did the work, and she asked me for a card. 2 years later, she calls me back and says, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm ready for my doors to be installed. I said, who's this? And I said, oh, yeah, I remember that. And I was just amazed that she saved that card and that information for 2 years, and thought of me when the time was right for her new house.
Yeah. That's a great story. So, did you end up shutting down the business and taking a job after you
I
graduated from
I
college? What
did.
happened there?
This vice president offered me a job, and it was for more money than I had been clearing. working on my own. And to be honest, I was right at that crossroads where you either start hiring and training people and growing the company, or you you do something else because you at a certain point, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? So you've
Yeah.
heard that expression before, and so I decided that, you know what, this is a great job offer. I'll be learning a new skill, and it ties in well with my major. I'd gotten an undergraduate in business and a finance minor, and so I felt that it was the right choice for me at that time.
And so then you're in the corporate world for how long? Like, give us the quick snapshot of
Well,
what
from
that part of your career looked like.
88 until 2012.
Okay, so
So
you're talking about 24 years?
yeah, they're 24. Well, yeah, 25 years, something like that. Yeah.
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 And what was it that had you always dreamed of going back to being a business owner, or was there some moment in time, something that happened where it triggered this for
Yeah,
you?
during COVID, so I was working for a huge construction company, and they had me on a project down in Louisiana, and my family was still up in North Carolina. And working away from home, and I'd been there for going on 3 years, and just traveling back and forth and missing the kids growing up and all that. I just said, you know what? It's not worth it. So I resigned and started looking for something local. And I found something local, and this was in 2019. Um, good company, good job. But when COVID hit, they severely downsized because they were in the maintenance industry and construction, and the customers were just saying, you know what, we're not going to do this project right now. So they took a pretty good hit at that time frame, and last hired, first fired. So
Yeah.
I was on the short list and got laid off. And I was looking for another job and came across an ad for a franchise for a handyman company.
Okay. So tell me about
And
what drew you in with that.
yeah, and I thought, well, I know how to do that. So I started thinking about it. My wife talked about it, and we thought, well, we could give this a shot. So we decided to move forward with the franchise.
So for you, it wasn't looking at a number of different kinds of businesses. You weren't even focused on that. You just happened to come across this ad and it triggered for you this connection to this business that you had run before, but potentially a path out of going back to work for someone else.
Correct. Yeah, I mean it. I'd always wonder. I mean, for the whole time I was corporate, every once in a while, I'd say on more than one occasion, I'd wonder, what if I had kept JBT door installations, a sole proprietorship in San Antonio, and grown it into JBT Corporation Inc., a C company with stocks and multiple, by now building my own houses. Who knows what would have come of that, right? Had I kept up with it.
Yeah. So you get this ad for this franchise. What does your research process look like? What did you do? What did you validate?
I did. Of course, they have a FDD. It's a franchise disclosure document that you read through, and in that document, everything looked like too good to be true. It looked really rosy, and um, I thought, well, even if it's not 100% true, it looks pretty good, and I felt real comfortable with the work. I felt comfortable with the estimating process. Of course, in construction, after almost 30 years of experience, almost 40 if you include my handyman work and before that, so I felt real comfortable moving forward. And we had a 401k with a sizable amount of money in it that we thought, well, we could use this as startup if we wanted to. And um, yeah, so I the weird thing is just in the same time frame, not only had I received an offer for a vice president for a large company, I had also started their onboarding process, already gone through the background checks, and And we were like on the fence. Okay, you got to make a decision. You want to go back
Okay.
into
So,
corporate as a vice president, or you want to take a risk on starting your own company?
okay. So you got to walk us through this logic here, John. You're facing a job offer for this VP role, and then this franchise that you've been researching that would give you a foot in the door to start your own business. Like, what were you looking at? What was the comparison? What were the thoughts going through your head?
Well, family first, right? That was the reason I resigned to begin with. If you can't spend time with your family, then it comes down to well, what is life? What is the meaning of life? If you don't have your family. So my wife and I sat down and we prioritized. All right, so what is our priority? Of course, our top was God and serving Him and a relationship with God, and then our second one was family. My wife and myself and the kids and the quality time. I'm not going to be on my deathbed saying, "Wow, it was really great working for these large construction companies, and I'm glad I was able to improve their bottom line." I
Yeah.
think it's going to be, "Wow, Dad, it's finally you're here on your deathbed, and it's good to get to know you." And I didn't want
Oh,
them to have that thought. So
yeah.
we chose an avenue that would maximize my time at home, and working for another large construction company of traveling all over the world, or at least the United States in this case, 4 days out of the week, and then spending a weekend at home. And uh, I just we just thought maybe this would be a better avenue for us.
Yeah. So, how far at this point when you got the VP offer, how far were you down the process of evaluating this franchise opportunity?
We were we had filled out the application paperwork. It had been approved, and they had sent me a email wanting me to schedule a time to come to their office and meet the franchise owner
Yeah.
and
Is that the discovery
do,
day?
yeah,
Yeah.
a kind of a discovery day thing, and kind of talk a little more details. And at the same time, the company that we had accepted an offer, wanted me to come and do drug testing. So I could either go do drug testing or go do Discovery Day. And I called them up and told them, look, I'm sorry, but we've got multiple offers, and I've decided to do something else. I did get a call from the president of the company, trying to get me to change my mind, and asking, so what was the problem? Was it the money? I mean, we can probably work on something with that. And was it the car? We can get you a new car if you want instead of the one from the fleet. I mean, they came back with some substantial offers. I told them no, it had nothing to do with that. It was a personal decision, and I don't want to burn a bridge here. So if things don't work out, maybe I'll be calling you. So
Yeah, and it sounds like for you, John, it was a real deliberate process with you and your wife to say, what matters most to us? What kind of life do we want to have over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
that's right.
And for you, the big thing you wanted to shift was, I don't want to travel so much. I want to be here. I want to be here for my kids, maybe some grandkids at some point. So you make this decision then to go to Discovery Day. What kind of research did you do on the franchise? Like, how did you
Oh,
know that it was the right fit? How did you validate, like, yeah, this financial model works? Like, walk us through anything that you did there that you thought was helpful.
so we walked through in there, had our Discovery Day, and I could tell right off the bat that the owner and I were two different animals. Um, I'm more of a methodical. My word is my bond. Um, let's get it right. And the franchise owner is more of a high level, fly by the seat of your pants, make any kind of promise you want, and then if it doesn't pan out, then you have to clarify it. And um, so I had a little bit of misgivings right off the bat. And in fact, before I turned down the letter to the VP, I actually wrote a letter to the franchise turning them down first. and expressed my concerns. I was going to move forward with the VP role, and Melissa and I huddled up again and said, before we move forward, let's listen to what they had to say, because they immediately reached out and wanted to talk. And I expressed my concerns, and we went through all of them, and they answered all my concerns satisfactorily, and so we kind of patched things up, and that's how we ended up moving forward.
Yeah. So tell me about this letter that you wrote. Like, what did you put in there? So clearly you had done some amount of due diligence as part of this discovery. A
Sure.
couple things step out to you that feel either inconsistent with your values or maybe are red flags for you about the model. What were those things, and what kind of clarity did you get to address those gaps?
So one of the items that I was getting from my investment broker was that taking money out of your 401k is like the worst idea you've ever had in your life. And I was getting a lot of pressure from that side of the fence. So that was one that we internally had to come with grips with.
And that was one you raised with the franchisor, or something that
Correct,
just
with
you
the
and Melissa were
franchisor. Yeah,
wrestling with? Okay.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
there anything that you recall being a red flag for you with the franchisor that you wanted to address with them?
One thing that kind of gave me hesitancy was the franchise sales approach. Very high pressure. Um, Lots of deadlines. We have to get this in by a certain date.
You mean of the
Um,
franchise sales process? I mean, it felt like they
the
were
sales
pushing you.
process really made me uncomfortable. It would be a lot better if it were, I mean, at least for me, if, I mean, let's be honest, whether you sell this today or you sell it 3 months from now, it doesn't matter, right? Your prices aren't going to change any. And in spite of what you tell me, um, there's nothing at all that's going to change, right? It's just still the
Yeah.
same territory, the same price, and whether so by putting deadlines, it's just a pressure tactic to get you to act quickly.
Yeah. So it
It's the
made you feel
oldest
like
trick
you
in
were
the
being
book.
sold versus partnered with or something.
Yeah, yeah. I felt like I was being sold instead of partnered with. And in hindsight, and given my background, I probably had no business buying a franchise. I should have just used the money to start my own company. And yeah, they had a few things that they brought to the table. Another one is that they wouldn't share any documentation or processes or anything with us until we've paid them for the territories and scheduled our initial training. And that's when they wanted to divulge their process manuals um, and that sort of thing. And I just wasn't I didn't like that either. So several
Yeah.
several things that
So you were trying
and
to
one is
evaluate.
one of the items that they said, okay, well, if when you come in, we'll let you go through the manuals, right? So that was one of the accolades that they gave me,
Yep.
and why they weren't um, as detailed or all encompassing that I would have liked to see from a policy manual. I mean, somebody that's written policies for multi-billion dollar companies. They were okay, I guess, for as a starting point. And I thought, okay, this is close enough. I can take this um, and put my own 2 cents into it, and we'll have some good policy manuals. So we we went through things like that. Meeting the staff, we hadn't met the staff yet. So I didn't know who their marketing guy was. We didn't know any of that, and we hadn't met him yet. And I'd
So
all I'd met in
it sounds like you were trying to evaluate, like, what's the quality of what I'm buying from the franchisor? Like, how
exactly
good are they at
what
the
am I
process?
getting?
Yeah,
What am I
how good are
getting?
they at the process? How good are their people in terms of
Yeah.
doing these things that are going to offer me support? So when you address this with them, how did they, to your satisfaction, sort of resolve those concerns?
Well, they gave us the copies of the manual while we were there, and I could go through
Okay.
them. Um, I never did tell them I didn't like their sales tactics. I mean, that was
That wasn't in the letter.
yeah, that wasn't in the letter. No,
Yeah.
I just kind of kept that one to myself. A lot of other things in the letter were, I already have a job offer, and instead of putting my 401k at risk, I think we'll maybe just go that route instead.
Yeah.
And I feel like we haven't been given enough information from you to make a good decision. You know, I can't see the policy manuals. I haven't met some key members of your staff that I feel like I will be working with. And if I'm going to be working with them, I'd really like to get to know them a little bit before I shell up this kind of money. And,
Yeah.
you know, things like that were in the letter. And they resolved them all. There wasn't a single thing left on that letter that, other than the sales tactic that I think was leaving a question in my mind.
Yeah. So let's go back to that pin we put in the retirement funds piece. So maybe you could help us understand what level of investment were you modeling out it was going to take to put this business together? And it sounds like you're getting a lot of pressure from your investment advisor. So how did you and your wife get together and make that decision? How did you look at the pros and cons and decide what was going to be best for you?
So I I got a spreadsheet from the franchise group on what startup costs would be.
Okay.
And so I validated everything on that list, and we found some pretty serious um,
If I
underestimates.
if
Under,
I
you know,
validated, meaning you got quotes from people or you
I got
called other
quotes from people, right?
franchisees,
So I
you
like
got
for
quotes.
general liability insurance, workman's comp insurance, FICA Fui Sui costs. Um, we did some initial pricing on used vehicles. I needed a truck and a van
Yep.
and a foreman's truck, you know, so there's three vehicles we had to buy. And then how much for wraps, you know, we have to pay for all the wraps, and they had their own estimate in there, which is about half what it actually cost.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they write the franchise disclosure document, this FDD, and they're supposed to update it every year, and they may update the verbiage, but they don't update the numbers. And so
Yeah.
we found these numbers were, you know, 10 years old. And so their startup costs were severely underestimated. And I brought it to their attention, and they said, "Well, I don't know where you're getting your prices, you know, because we did a startup just last year, and it actually came in under that." Okay, right. Well, you're not in North Carolina, around Lake Norman, and you're I don't know where you're getting those prices. Could you give me the pricing from the insurance company for this, and from your place you're buying your cars from this? And I mean, I went down my list and said, great, wonderful. Send
Yeah.
me these
You
vendors
could
so that
save
I
me
can get bid
half. I'll
for them.
take it.
Yeah, I never got the list, right? So,
Yeah.
um, I so we so the question about the 401k. So we went through a lot of this, and we not only found out what I felt our true startup costs would be, but also how we would have to size, you know, how many craftsmen am I going to need working full time to pay for the overhead that
Yep.
we're now generating? And you know, I'd go back. That reminds me, another thing that I really wasn't comfortable with, it was the startup requirements. Um, he required us to have a storefront. We're required to have at least three vehicles, and we're required to, of course, have our own phone number and internet service and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know about you, but when I started up my company, I lived in my mom's house and did work out of my 71 Chevrolet pickup. So my overheads were like
Yeah.
gas, insurance, and any tool expenditures that I wanted to make,
Yeah.
and a few doctor visits here and there. But that's basically it, you know. Of course, at being a sole proprietor, I didn't have to have workman's comp insurance. And back then, we weren't required to have general liability insurance, which may or may not be the case now. There's some towns that even have handyman licenses that you have to get.
Oh, wow.
But we have, you know, general liability insurance. We have, I'm a licensed contractor now, so we have contractor license, continuing education, and that sort of stuff, and
Yeah.
fees that go along with it. But anyway, you're kind of required to do these things, and by filling those requirements, that puts you in an overhead situation of about 20 to 25 or even $30,000 a month in overhead.
Yeah.
And in order to pay for that, if you're not pricing your projects correctly, you're going to go under very quickly. And unfortunately, we weren't. I go to the franchisor and ask him, so what should we be charging? And his answer was, well, everyone else is charging this, or everyone else is charging that, or I don't know. What do you think? And
Yeah.
that
Sounds like it
just,
was sounds like it was really critical, your experience that you had on this front, because a lot of what you had experience with is doing this
yeah.
quoting and understanding what costs were.
And
So
it made him extremely nervous. I mean, he's not a very secure person. So when I'd point out shortcomings, he would just blow them off or say that's just not right or whatever. So we actually ended up engaging another consultant that turned our ship around probably in year 2. I mean, we didn't make any money in year 1.
what do you mean by
Well, it was
what do you
towards
mean
the
by
end of year 2.
consultant?
Pardon?
What do you mean by consultant? That seems like an important pivot that happened in your
Oh, it
business.
was a
Yeah.
huge find for us. Profit for contractors. I can't say
Okay.
enough good things about these guys. They run a consulting company out of Canada for small business contractors, and they will walk you through the process of how to price your jobs, how to market your company, how to do all kinds of stuff that small construction companies, they just don't know how to do it. And
So that was the critical piece, it sounds like. So even with the experience you had at these much larger companies, your business probably wouldn't be successful today if it wasn't for this other company coming in and helping you rethink how the model was functioning.
exactly, right.
Oh,
And
that's great.
how to, I've always knew, no, I know what a P&L is. I learned it in undergrad, right? And I know
Yep.
what a balance statement is, and I know, all these pieces of the puzzle. And in corporate world, we know about production factors, and we know about labor costs, and we know about pricing cost on a job and doing estimates, but none of those give you the skills on exactly how to price a project, right?
Yep.
And even as the director of estimating for a company, we would, as the estimators, we would come up with the cost of a project. What's it going to cost to do the project? And then we would have meetings with the CEOs and everything, and they would price the
Figure
project.
out how much they needed to be above that to cover its
Ex-
contribution to the overhead of the
exactly, to
business.
cover
Yeah.
contribution and fee, right?
Yep.
So while I knew they did that, there was no explanation of why the contribution was what the contribution was. The rate, it was an overhead rate,
Yep.
and then why the fee was what the fee was.
Yeah.
So I guess had I taken the VP level job, I would have been exposed to that decision making. But up to then, I had never been exposed to that, right? And I don't even know that the companies I worked at were doing it right. Who knows,
Yeah.
right? So, but PFC, or Profit for Contractors, actually walked you through examples of how to take your P&L for last year and find your overhead cost divided by your gross revenue, and you come up with that's your overhead rate,
Yeah.
and you do that for the last 3 years or 4 years or whatever you have, and see if that overhead rate remains the same. If it's been going up, is it going down? And then based on that, if it's 50%, then it's like, well, I can't really maintain a 50%. My prices would be too high. So how can we bring it down? Well, the only other option
Got to
is
grow.
to increase your revenue
Yep.
or cut some of your overhead, right?
Yep.
So the first time we ran that, it was like, oh my goodness gracious, no wonder we're not making any money. So we went through every single line item in our overhead section of the P&L, and we renegotiated insurance. We renegotiated general, not only car insurance, auto insurance. We also renegotiated general liability. We started dropping some of the non-productive associations that we were members of that were costing us $1,200 a year, and we weren't really getting much business out of it.
Yeah.
We went through with a fine-tooth comb and just cut everything that we could. So we knew I had our overhead section of the P&L as low as I could get it.
Yeah. Tight as it was going to be.
Yep. And then we started setting sales goals, and we said, all right, in order to get our overhead to 40%, that was our goal, get it down to 40 or 38%. We need to hit sales of at least $650,000 a year or more. And given that, you take that number and you divide it by 12, or you divide it by 52, and then I'm able to tell my sales estimator a concrete number.
Yep.
You got to hit X amount of dollars a week in sales, or at least so much per month, right? I mean, sales kind of go up and down. You'll get nothing, and then all of a sudden you'll win, 6 jobs.
Yep.
So we did it bi-monthly, but we track it weekly. But he's got to hit a certain amount so that we know at the end of the year we're going to hit our sales goals. And as long as we do that and keep our eye on our overhead, we're going to make money. And it worked. Also, the nice thing about pricing your jobs right is in the first 2 or 3 years of business, since our prices were so low, we were covered up with all kinds of work.
Yeah.
But guess what? Everyone was hiring us. And so every single job you do is a potential problem.
That's because you're paying them for this amazing work you're doing.
With our hair on fire, with putting out fires and problems and then doing marginal work. I mean, it may contribute to overhead if we hit the hours just right and or beat them a little bit. And if our material prices came in under cost, then we would make maybe, $100 contributed to overhead, no fee at all. It was just contribution. So we were working the whole year, and it turns out the contribution wasn't enough. So now that we're pricing the jobs right, we do half the number of jobs, but we're doing like 30% more in revenue.
Yeah. So knowing what you know now about this whole process, what would you have done differently earlier?
I would not have done a franchise.
Okay. So you would have set it up just as a startup.
It's just as a startup. Yeah. Just as a startup. And I mean, knowing what I know now, I would have partnered used that money that I poured in the franchise. I partnered with Profit for Contractors for a long-term engagement. We only did 6 months because it's all I could afford. Well, we did 6 months, and then we went monthly for the rest of the year. And they're I mean, just a heads up, they're not cheap, but they're worth it, right? So if you can carve out some money, they will put you on the right track.
Sounds like it saved your business.
It did, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah. So let's circle back to the feeling pressure from your investment advisor. Your strategy for financing, it sounds like, hinges on using these retirement funds. Like, how did you make that decision?
So we're big Dave Ramsey fans.
Okay.
And I remembered Dave Ramsey talking about, I couldn't remember ROBS. That was the key word I was trying to remember. But he had been talking about a way for people to finance startup companies. And
Randy talked about it? I've never heard that. Yeah. Interesting.
And I can't remember if he thought it was a good idea or not. To be honest with you, I don't remember. But I do remember him talking about there is a way to use your 401k to start up a business. And so I got on the internet and started, searching how do you start up a business with your 401k? And Guidant came up, and I looked at all the stuff on the internet, read through it rather detailed, looked for reviews, and that was actually, for the amount of money we were talking about, I didn't have that kind of savings. So, I mean, just free and clear. So that was the only way we were going to be able to do this.
Yeah. So let's circle back to the actual decision to move forward with that process, separate from the sort of research about uncovering it and how it works, because I'm guessing you're not the only person who's ever ran into some friction with their investment advisor. So what was that like? And what did you and your wife talk about? What were the pros and cons that you went through, and why ultimately did you decide this is the right path for us?
We we talked a lot about it, and I told her, this is our savings. And when you're a business owner, I mean, having been a business owner before, this consumes your life until you get it to a point that you can turn over the reins to a good general manager, and they can be kind of hands-on, the guy taking care of most of the job. And that will probably take, 7, 8, 10 years, who knows. Um, so there was that, I guess, downside to going forward with this. And the other thing we talked about was the only other option we could do is not do this, what means that puts me back in the VP role and I'm away from home. Um, our our advisor was telling us, oh, well, you can get a loan um, for up to 80% of your 401k, and you could finance it that way. I mean, at first he told us, no, you can't do it. Don't do it. I mean, 90% of the time people do this, that ends up in failure, right? Because they don't know what they're doing and they end up in trouble. Well, he was right on both accounts. I thought, I mean, as far as the business goes, I knew what I was doing. As far as the work goes, I knew what I was doing. As far as the estimating goes, I could estimate the cost. But as far as the pricing of the jobs, I didn't know what I was doing, and I thought I did.
Yeah.
And um, so he was right from that perspective. Had we not run across PFC, and we probably would have been closed. We probably would have been closed by now. I don't say probably, say we would have been. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about it. Um, so he was right in saying that business startups very rarely last longer than 2 years, and 50% I think go under in 2 years, and another 50% go out in 4. So you're looking at 75% of companies, small startups, end up in failure after 3 years or 4 years. So I mean, it was just this astronomical numbers. But I'm kind of a pig-headed guy, and once I've made up my mind, it's hard to change it. And we just stuck with it. And I finally told him, you know what, this is a path we decided to go down, and um, we want to be a family again and do this business together. And uh, I'm fairly certain we can turn this into a company that is worth the 300,000 that we have in savings and then some, and turning that kind of a profit. And of course, our hope is to pay off our buyback, do a company buyback of our stocks, and then turn this into maybe an S corp or LLC, depending whatever
Yeah.
is right sized for a small business rather than a C corp.
Yeah. And I guess one big question I have for you is, having been through this journey now for 4-ish years, maybe almost 5 years, um, would you go back and do it again? If so, why? If not, why not?
I think I would, only I would obviously structure it a lot better. I mean, the whole thing about locking somebody into a overhead that is so high, um, I
Yeah.
think leads to a lot of failures in the franchises. I would start the company up as a home-based business, working out of my garage and my shop, and grow as the company grows. You don't want to pretend you're a big boy or a big company and then try to grow into that pretense.
Yeah.
So that's the idea, is try to pretend that you're something you're not and fake it till you make it approach, versus I don't mind being Chuck in a truck for the amount of time it takes me to establish a company base,
Yeah.
establish a reputation, and then get so much business that I need to hire somebody, and then get more business, and then open up a storefront if that makes sense after I know I can afford it. I
Yeah,
mean, you
makes
grow into something and you grow into a reputation and you grow into a good customer base. You can't do that because you have zero. I mean, you have $20,000 a month in overhead and you have this many customers.
yep.
Zero. Goose egg.
Yeah, what
And
you're
nobody
saying
knows,
makes
right?
yep, what you're
And
saying makes a ton of sense.
yeah, and nobody knows you, and you don't know your craftsmen. I mean, you're hiring these guys off the street, and you interview them, and you hope you did a good job interviewing them, and it turns out that the guy's a felon, and he steals the stealing fans that you just bought for this customer and disappears. Or the brand new $800 tile saw that you buy and you put in the back of somebody's truck, and then you never hear from 'em again. Yeah,
Oh,
so those things
well,
happen.
John, despite the challenges, the ups and downs over the 4 years, the hard lessons learned, why would you do it again? What is it about your life now that you
Oh,
wouldn't trade for what your life was before?
so setting my own hours, um, the challenges of every day is a new day and different things happen. Uh, Working with the family, being home every evening. My wife is the office manager, um, and she just does a fantastic job. She's a people person. I'm not, so we need that side of the business, and she just does an excellent job. People just love her.
Well, John, maybe I could ask you the question. The name of our podcast is Create the Life You Want, and it's really built around this spirit of a business offers someone an option. They can, sort of follow what they think everyone else is telling them is the right thing to do, or they can find a way to build it in a way that serves the life they want to live and the way they want to operate. So I'm curious, when you think about that term, create the life you want, how have you used your business to create the life that you want now, the one that you wouldn't trade despite the challenges in the work?
For the first 2 and 3/4 years, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. That was 12-hour days.
It's always the hard
Uh,
part. That's the
oh
slog.
man, it was awful. And we plowed through the majority of our savings. I mean, we were so depressed, but every time I thought, okay, I'm not going to be able to make payroll today. This is it. We're done. God would see us through. Another job would come, and we'd make payroll. And so I can't stress enough the um the amount of times that how close our family has gotten together after going through this. It has just been a blessing from that point of view that we have bonded together closer than ever. And there's been a few rough patches maybe that we disagree on something, but not for the most part. And
Yeah.
so that is something that I've never had, or in my 30 years of working industrial construction, was that kind of closeness with the family. And that was one of our main objectives, and I think I could check that box off as accomplished, or ongoing, but accomplished what we wanted it to do.
Yeah.
After we started pricing things right, and we started actually making some money, and are able to um, work some normal hours, getting home and it's still daylight is really nice. I still have time to mow the yard, or whatever needs to happen. So, you know, that's another plus. And now I think we're talking about expanding the business into making cabinets and starting a cabinet shop,
Oh,
or
cool.
actually buying and flipping houses. So another company that would hire our franchise group as workers, or as to doing specific projects, but another company that focused on real estate and buying and flipping houses, something outside of the franchise, but diversifying the company. So we're talking about and exploring options to do that now. And I never would have done that, had we not gone down this path.
Yeah, it's also an interesting investment strategy in the long run too, is with the specialty that you have, you can go in and make things feasible and workable and maybe even turn them into rentals and build assets over time. There's a lot of
Yeah,
ways you can take this in the
absolutely.
future.
If we don't flip them, we could rent them.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. So it's a natural progression, I think, for somebody or a company in our industry and situation.
Well, my final question for you, John. We've talked about a lot of things and the ups and downs of your journey. I'm curious if someone came to you and they were in the stage of thinking about or looking to buy or start a small business, what is the single best piece of advice you would give them based on what you've lived through and experienced?
Single best advice. Number one, if you're thinking about a franchise, really think hard about it, because the borrower is slave to the lender, and they're not lending in you any money, but they're lending you a process and information, and make sure that that process they're giving you and the information they're giving you is something truly over and above what you could not learn on your own, because you're going to be paying them 10, 12, 14% in royalties straight off the top of your company. And in many times, that's your profit margin. So I would caution people that franchises, while a lot of them have a system down that is easily started up, and you're up and running a lot faster, which is what the argument for a franchise is, many of them you could learn that on your own, especially if you've been in the industry for a while and know the business. So if you've been in a restaurant and you've been the person up front, you've been a busboy, you've been a waiter, you've been a waitress, or you've been in the back cooking, or you know the business, then maybe buying that franchise for a restaurant isn't, Culver's or something like that isn't what you need. You can just start up your own, and then you'll be unique. You won't just be another McDonald's. You'll be a unique restaurant, or you'll be a unique whatever. Um, just think about that. It would
Yeah.
be one advice. And the other advice is make sure you have a solid, if you can grow into the company, I would say that's the way to do it. If you can't, then make sure you have a solid understanding of your financials, and you're pricing your product to cover it appropriately.
Yeah, makes sense. One sub question to my final question, John.
Okay.
When you talk about the franchise consideration for someone, what would you tell someone who thinks, "Hey, the franchise is the right fit for me"? What advice would you give them on how to find the good franchises versus the ones you're talking about that may not be providing something that's unique or helpful or valuable in the same way?
Per the requirements around franchises, the franchisor has to let you talk to any franchisee you want to. And he has to provide you a list of all of his franchisees. Don't pick the one that he says, oh, well, this one is close to you and you can go see him. You can go talk to that one, but tell him, I want to go talk to, and you pick out your own. And
Sure.
when you're talking to that person, be sure to tell them that nothing you tell me is going past us. Get them in a safe environment so that they're able to truly tell you what they think about the franchisor, how easy is he to work with, what sort of value did he bring to your startup? Did he really help you, or was he not helpful? You know, that would be my advice to somebody. If you really want to do a franchise, make sure you talk to other franchisees about the process and their experience with the franchisor.
That is solid advice, John, and maybe a great way to end our interview today. I really appreciate you taking the time and being so thoughtful about your willingness to share even the dark moments and the things that were tough about the journey, because those of us who have been down the path know that that's part of every story. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when and how many times.
Yeah.
So appreciate you taking the time to share, John, and I wish
All
you the
right.
best of luck as you continue to expand your business.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. It's great to be here.
Thanks for listening to the Create the Life You Want podcast. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to future episodes by clicking the subscribe button, you know where. If you're an aspiring business owner, you may also want to subscribe to the Create the Life You Want newsletter for more inspiration and tips delivered to your inbox every week. You can find the link to that in the show notes, as well as on my personal website, jeremyames.com. If you've already decided you want to start or buy a business, consider exploring your financing options by heading to our sponsor's website at www.guidantfinancial.com. That's GUIDANT financial.com. See you in the next episode.